We're live.
Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Coach Steve. We are back for another great episode to talk about some waiver wire pickups for Week 16. Hopefully, you guys won last Week 15, and you're on to the semis now. So let's introduce the crew. Coach Gibbs, what is going on today, brother?
Better till I heard that Jalen Hurts news, but pretty good.
We'll get to that in a short bit. So, yes, I know you weren't thrilled with it, but happens. Coach John, he's got some work things, so you couldn't join us tonight, but he'll be back hopefully on Thursday. So let's get right into the news today, guys. A lot of things were going on, so let's do that. All right, guys. So for fantasy news this week, we got some injuries, some pretty big injuries that kind of screwed us, are going to be screwing us. I mean, I didn't even play in one of my leagues, and I lost 2 players. I don't even know how that's possible. Well, I know how it's possible. It just hurts. But, Colt McCoy, injured, out for the game, concussion. There's a good chance he doesn't play in Week 16. Ryan Tannehill, ankle injury that sent him out of the game for a little bit, but he did come back. But the ankle's a little sore there, so we'll see what happens with that. This one was from Thursday, right after we did our start and sit show. Tyler Lockett, broken bone in his hand. He is likely done for the season. So we'll talk about some pickups for him. Guy like Marquise Goodwin could be an option now, but we'll mention that in a few. This is the big one, Jonathan Taylor. And it might not be that big because he hasn't been that good this year, Jibs. But high ankle sprain, out for the season here. I mean, you might be talking about this in a few, but if you had to pick someone right now, I mean, maybe you're giving us a little hint. Who's the guy you want between the two?
Oh, it depends what league I'm playing in.
That's true. So let's just say, I mean, would you say Jackson PPR is Mollison non-PPR kind of thing?
Yeah, that's basically how I'll lean. Yeah, and I don't see Matt Ryan being able to fling it down the field, so I think he'll probably use Deion Jackson just a little bit more. But we saw Moss is basically just take over the backfield when he was gone. Basically, almost 2 more rusher attempts. So it's weird. I'll probably lean Jackson this week though if I had to pick the two.
Yeah, I would say the same, just strictly because I mean they were up 30-0 at one point. Jackson did fumble, but I mean maybe that gave the door open for Moss for that potential. But I think it's still too soon to tell what scenario is going to happen in the future weeks to come. In the last few weeks, actually, because of the score, how it was at the time. So we'll wait to see on that. We'll talk a little bit more during the waiver wire portion. Austin Eckler, he had a shoulder injury, came back negative, so seems like he's okay, but just keep your eyes caution on that. Joshua Kelly's a name that's floating out there for sure if that's the case. And this is obviously the big one. Jalen Hurts suffered a shoulder strain in Week 15 against the Chicago Bears. Now uncertain to play in Week 16. Gardner Minshew would get the start against Dallas. How big is this, Jibs, not having Jalen Hurts out there for this offense?
Oh, I think it's significant. I'm sure the receivers will get I'll say they'll kind of sustain some value. Brown will be a low end wide receiver 2. I think Smitty will be probably a wide receiver 3, and you got to roll like that. But I don't see their role changing within the offense, especially given the state of the game. I don't think Philly and Dallas are going to be playing 7-3 Christmas Eve special or anything. I think points are going to be scored in that game. So whether they're just relying on Sanders, but I think the 3 skill position people that we've been leaning on, Brown, Smitty, and Sanders, are going to be fine. I just think you just got to, what we always say, go with that hope of.
Yeah, that's true. Wow.
I don't know.
I mean, man, it definitely sucks. I mean, obviously, I think Jalen Hurts himself, losing him is bad for any fantasy team.
It's the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I know Minshew might be able to do something. I mean, there was a reason why some people like Minshew a lot, especially in dynasty leagues. I mean, I think he could keep one of these two guys afloat. I mean, I don't think we knew that Jalen Hurts was an elite passer. He was gotten sustainably better, but was he sustainably enough better than Gardner Minshew as a passer? Maybe, obviously, slightly. But it was more what Jalen Hurts could do with the ball in his hand in other ways. Where Minshew is more of a thrower, and he might be able to keep both Brown and Smith from falling off without Jalen Hurts if he is for a week or two. So it might involve more Miles Sanders, which would be awesome because I could use that this week. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens here. Don't forget Dallas Goedert's going to be coming back too. So Gardner Minshew could be an attractive dreamer option, and we'll see if he can keep three players afloat. Maybe not, but it's definitely a tick down overall for this offense. They're going to have to do something different here. So we'll see how it works. Khalil Herbert, Chicago Bears backup running back, is designated to return from the IR. This could be big, obviously, because he was at one point the man in Chicago over David Montgomery personally. That's how I felt about it. But we'll see how much of a role he'll get coming into Week 15. And then Sammy Watkins got released from the Packers. Not big news, but had to throw that in there just because it's Sammy. So, yeah, again, that's most of the news. We're going to talk about some waiver wire pickups in just a few minutes here. But let's get into our first segment of the day here, the Trustometer Jibs. All right, so we got about 8 players that, do we trust in the final 2 weeks of the season here? And we'll start with Kenneth Walker, who finally came back from injury after taking a week off in Week 14. It was great to see him back on the field here. It was a tough matchup against the 49ers, and he had about 10 fantasy points or so. Do you trust him over the next 2 weeks, Jibs? What's your trust level in Kenneth Walker with Kansas City and the New York Jets coming up?
I took it as 1 week, but New York Jets probably be a little bit more tedious matchup for him, but I'll give him a 6. Like, he's still going to be the main rusher. I love the fact that he had like 4 receptions last week, which is definitely a good step in the right direction for him. So if he can sustain that, I think he'll be usable. Kansas City, like, they're going to have to keep up with them. So, like, we saw Davis Mill have magic last week. So I think Geno could come back to the good graces for fantasy managers. And I think Kenneth Walker could probably benefit from that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I checked him a little bit more. I think I have him up as an 8. As long as he's healthy, I have him up as an 8 right now. I mean, without Tyler Lockett, you could see more passes come his way, which would be fantastic. I mean, we saw, pretty high season high 5 targets in this past week here. I'm hoping that can kind of sustain itself over the next 2 weeks here now. Easier matchups in terms of run. Kansas City's not really great against the run. The Jets are slightly above average. So, I mean, there's still potential for him to produce us over the next 2 weeks. I mean, he's still a Lockett-loaded RB2 in fantasy. If you have him on your team, isn't someone I'm too worried about, but as long as he's healthy, that's all that matters. So, all right, next up is D'Onta Foreman, who, had a really bad game this past week, 10 carries for 9 yards. I mean, it seems like over the last 2 weeks now since their bye, it's been kind of more of the Chuba Hubbard show a little bit in terms of production. What is your trust level with D'Onta Foreman right now with Detroit, who's much better now against the run and a pretty strong defense in the Bucs as well?
It's definitely a 2, just because of your aforementioned Chuba Hubbard, who's splitting the work. The Lions actually haven't given up a PPR a running back to finish over 10 PPR points since week 7. So, like, I think they both have the work cut out. And then Tampa Bay obviously is another tough defense. So, like, it's definitely 2. He's sitting on the pine. Like, I have both him, DJ Moore on the team. I've been alternating them. Can't figure out which one's going to go off. And he's sitting on the pine for the rest of the season. I'll tell you that one.
Yeah, I'm definitely on that 2 to 1 range there. I don't really want to trust them the way this offense is producing with Sam Darnold at quarterback now. It's not really focused on D'Onta Foreman anymore. Chuba Hubbard is seeing a big workload. If Chuba Hubbard were to go down, okay, different story. I believe in Foreman more, but if this is the split we're seeing here over the next 2 weeks, I really don't want to trust that in my fantasy playoffs. So I would be on the sit train right now for D'Onta Foreman or that level 1 or 2 area. So, all right, next up is Tyler Algier, who had a monster 139 yards in Week 15 here with, I would say, 2 reasonably decent matchups in the Baltimore Ravens and the Arizona Cardinals here. He had hit 17 carries here. We don't know how much, the rookie quarterback Desmond Ridder is going to throw the ball week in and week out, but it seems like it's a pretty hard two-headed committee with him and Cordell Patterson. What's your level with Tyler Algier? And he might be a waiver pickup, but I mean, what was your level if you have him on your team, James?
This one would probably be a 5, just because like this is kind of similar to Foreman to a degree. Like he's still splitting the rushing attempts 50%. I think he played 49% of the stats last week, and yeah, like it seems like they're trying to rely on him. So you have that pointing in the right direction. Like Baltimore's defense, yeah, they gave up 99 yards to Nick Chubb on 21 rush attempts. If he could get the same load and kind of keep up some of those good Russian fit metrics that he had last week, he could be a fine flex. But like, I don't know if I'm gonna be like optimistically rolling him out as like an RB2 in my lineup. So that's why he's a 5 for me.
Yeah, no,
Arizona matchup's gonna be beautiful.
yes, absolutely. I think I like your ranking there as a 5 overall. I think a 5 would be a pretty solid overall pick because I think if you're looking for a flex option over the next few weeks here, depending on how your matchup looks like, he has potential to, be able to produce for you in fantasy. And I mean, it seems like he's seeing enough of a workload. He's seeing over double-digit carries last 3 weeks here now, and he's put up at least 50 yards each game. Now, it's not great. It's not something I want to completely rely on, but in the right matchup, I mean, these next 2 weeks, it could be potentially there to put him as a good flex option. So I like that one. Next one is Leonard Fournette, Jibs. And Leonard Fournette, man, he went from early on stud this season to just completely falling off the rails. I mean, for me personally, that's how I feel about him. 7 fantasy points this past week. He has the bank. I mean, he just played the Bengals. I didn't put their stats in yet, but he did not have a good week against the Bengals. I know that for sure. And the week before, he had the 49ers. He does have the Cardinals, though, which is a better matchup. And he has the Carolina Panthers here, who I think is somewhere in the middle in terms of effectiveness for running backs. How do you feel about Leonard Fournette, who kind of seen his role kind of diminish over the last few weeks outside of passing?
It's quite funny. It's like diminished, but he's kind of still having some good yardage to a degree. Like he looks a little bit better, more spry running than like Rashad White. In PPR leagues, he's gonna be a 4 for me. Like I just feel like he's good for 10 points. If you want 10 points in your lineup, a guaranteed 10, it's him. Like he'll get you 30, 40 yards on the ground, and he'll probably pick up 30, 40 in the air. So like I like Lenny as that, but other than that, like you're not starting him for any upside whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think I'm around that 5.5 range when it comes to Leonard Fournette because he has seen 6 receptions in the last 3 games now, and that's like you said, good for about 10 fantasy points or so now. I mean, I really don't hate that. I think it's a pretty good overall value for fantasy if you're looking for a floor play at least. It's not going to be the upside play like you said, Jibs, but it'll give you 10 fantasy points. You can't beat that most times. But I'm not 100% thrilled to have in my lineup. Isn't somebody I'm like, oh, he's locked and loaded right now. So, all right. Next up, we go over some wide receivers here. Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk has just 1 game over 10 fantasy points over the last 4 weeks now. He hasn't really clicked with Brock Purdy, even without Deebo Samuels this past week here. What is your level with him with, actually favorable matchups to Washington and the Raiders? How do you feel about Ayuk the next 2 weeks?
I don't have him anywhere, so thankfully I don't have to make that decision. But if I did have him on a roster somewhere, it'll probably be a 4 because like he's just kind of downtrending in production. Like the metrics, I guess like the optics don't look good. It's basically the ball's going to Christian McCaffrey and or George Kittle when he's just wide open down the field. So like it just seems like Ayuk's playing third fiddle, and like the places that he's going to get the ball, or it's in like harder situations for Brock Purdy to get it to him. So like I'm kind of off on Ayuk. It'll be a 4, but if you're playing in a 3 wide receiver league and all that whatnot, like it's kind of hard to get away with them to find someone that's uh, someone else on your roster to plug them in, given the scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense overall. I mean, I'm not a fan of him. It just seems like Brock Purdy's not really throwing the Brandon Ayuk's way. He's keeping it short to Christian McCaffrey. The game, this offense is running through Christian McCaffrey now. It's not running through Brandon Ayuk anymore. It just seems to be off with him right now. And the fact that he's not just seeing the target share that I want to see out of him, it frightens me to even put in my starting lineup. I mean, you have to be desperate. I need a desperate flex option, and he kind of fits that desperate flex option role for me. It's more of a 4 right now. I mean, if you throw him in there, I mean, I thought the matchup was pretty favorable last week to some extent, and he kind of just shit the bed a little bit. And I think that's what you can expect out of him. Again, he could have a boom week still, but it's just really hard to trust Brandon Ayuk right now. So I like that for level 4 there for you, Jibs, as well. So, all right, on to the next one. Gabe Davis, man. Gabe Davis has been killing us. Just haven't seen the big Gabe stable waiting for since, was it week 10? Under 10 fantasy points now in 5 straight games here. But he does have good matchups, at least next week against the Bears. Cincinnati might be a little tougher, but we saw what the Eagles did against the Bears this past week. What is your level of confidence with Gabe Davis over the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, there is no confidence. Yeah, it just stinks. Like I don't know. Like the matchups aren't easy, and like you see the emergence of Dawson Knox, who we're about to get into. Like he's been more involved over the last couple of weeks. Diggs is going to get his, and you have the ancillary pieces with Cole Beasley on the horizon, McKenzie. So like it's just nothing's going good for him since the bye week. He's played 8 games, 6 of them been under 10 fantasy points, 2 of them been over. One was a good game, and the other one was like 11 points. So it's not like it's anything to hum ho about. So it's a 1.
Yeah, I'm still sitting around like 4-3.
God bless you.
I know. I mean, it just depends on how your matchup is looking each and every single week, and that's my confidence level with him. It's just like, if you know you're going to lose this matchup in your semis or in your finals, I'm throwing Gabe Davis in, because if I'm already projected to lose, I might as well throw Gabe Davis, because yes, it hasn't been there in over 5 weeks, but there's still that potential that he puts another big game before the season's over, and there's that level of knowing that could be possible for me. That's why there's still some trust, but it's really minimal, obviously, and it's hard to put him in. I mean, if you know you're going to win your matchup, I would try to avoid Gabe Davis. There's just no point to put him in my lineup right now. But if you're a team who's looking to make a big play, he might be it still. So that's why I'm kind of at a 3, but I'm definitely not actively wanting to start him each and every single week right now.
Well, you could say like it's kind of like Deontay Johnson was doing dog crap during the middle of the year, and then like he's kind of finally hitting a stride. No touchdown, but like,
yeah, I hope he scores. Could use him to score at least 1 point this season. All right. On to the next one, Chris Olave. Chris Olave now has 3 straight games under 10 fantasy points. Actually, just 1 game over 10 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. He's been held under 65 yards in the 3 straight games here now, and he's seen his targets kind of decrease each and every week, and favorable matchup, especially in Atlanta. But he's got Cleveland and Philly, which I think are a little tougher in terms of matchups. It doesn't seem like he's the number 1 consistently now, maybe. How do you feel about Chris Olave?
Maybe he hit the proverbial rookie wall or so. I don't know. Like another person I don't have, I'll say it's a 4 because like he has a proven track record during the season, but like you said, the offense aren't good. Like he's barely involved. You have Shaheed, who's kind of rising up, Jawan Johnson, who's just catching everything, getting all the touchdowns, and then Taysom Hill is also involved. So like, I don't know. It's hard to trust anyone on the Saints. Like you can't even trust Alvin Kamara. So I really can't give him like a good grade. Matchups are terrible. So 3.
Yeah, I'm probably just in that like 4.5 range. It's really hard to me to put him in my starting lineup right now, because he's not performing to the high end wide receiver 2 he was at one point this season. He's more like a borderline wide receiver 3 right now in fantasy, and it's hard to trust unless you have another piece that you can throw. Unless you have to almost keep him in, but unless you have a piece that you like preferably better, then that's like, all right, well, I don't need to start Chris Olave, and that's where your point where he's no longer like in that 5 range. He's below 5 now for me, and he's like matchup dependent. And the matchups aren't good unless you don't have anything better. You're not really putting. That's the only way you're putting in Chris Olave right now. So 4.5 for me right now when it comes to Chris. So. All right, 2 more real quick, and we'll finish up with this. Darren Waller, first game back, not too bad, 3 for 48 and a touchdown. He's got Pittsburgh, who's, I think, about in the middle of the pack in terms of tight ends, and 49ers are pretty tough against tight ends, but the tight end position is one not to take for granted here. He was a star at one point. He's just been hurt a lot, unfortunately. What's your level with Darren Waller?
If I got him, I'm starting him. All tight ends. Like, Jesus Christ, like I've just been, it's like the upside down with tight ends. Like Mark Andrews so good in the beginning of the year, he's just basically nothing. You see like the Fire Muse gave you nothing last week. We've been touting him basically the whole season. So like it's a grab bag every week. With the Raiders, like they're trying to get in the playoffs. So I think I'm gonna ride with Darren Waller if I got him. I'll say 6 because like San Francisco's no joke in the finals.
Yeah, I think a 6, 7. As long as he's healthy and playing, you have to throw him in because unless you find someone on your waivers with just a really good matchup and you know they're going to see 5, 6 targets, you might as well throw Darren Waller in because he is an elite tight end. There's a reason why people drafted him high enough where he did. And obviously, if you drafted him and you held him on an IR this so long, you're going to probably put him back in your starting lineup. And I mean, you might not make the playoffs because of Darren Waller before, but if you made the playoffs and he's on your team still, you got to give him a trust at least to at least put something up. So
Good matchup off the waiver wire. Oh, Greg Dulcich, he killed me.
yeah, that did not work out well for a lot of us this week. Last but not least, Dawson Knox, who's really come on his own over the last 2 weeks now. 2 games over 15 fantasy points, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's over 14 fantasy points. Hold on one second.
2 games over 14.
2 games over
14,
10. He's
21.
got, a touchdown in back-to-back games, 15 targets over the last 2 games. He's got Chicago and Cincinnati. Again, kind of mediocre teams against tight ends overall. I think Chicago's actually been pretty good overall against tight ends. How do you feel about Dawson Knox? You think he is that new number 2 that you can rely on this team that can be used as a tight end?
Every December. But I liked his matchups a little bit better. I'll give him a 7. Chicago, I still believe they could probably blow him out, and he's been on a production tear, so I think he'll kind of keep it. You see the Bills are winning, they probably want to keep up the mojo. So it's, as much as we dragged his name through the mud throughout the season, he's gonna get a 7 from Coach Jibby.
All right, I like it. Don't hate it. I'm probably around a 6 though, because I don't completely trust him. I know the last 2 big games have been fantastic for him. He's obviously being more involved in the offense, but I mean, I don't know if I completely buy in that he's going to just continue to this stretch down the season here. I mean, I don't know what impact Cole Beasley's going to make being on this team now. If he becomes some kind of a safety blanket for Josh Allen again when he gets up to speed on the game, it might just be for me just more of a safety blanket thing for Josh Allen the last 2 weeks than anything. Even though he's had 6 targets and 4 of the last 6 games at least, but I'm still around a 6. You can play him if you want. Obviously, if there's a better option, I'm looking that way if there is. So that's how I feel about Dawson Knox. So, all right. So that's the end of our Trustometer. Let's get into the top 5 overall waiver wire pickups. Jibs, you got your top 5. Go for it.
Keep it short and sweet. Let's fix my mouse. But if you need a quarterback this week, I need a quarterback this week. I'm probably gonna go with Zach Wilson, and I know he had some ups and downs in that thriller, or I guess like that title, the fight against the Lions this week. But now he's going to go against the Jaguars, who've given up multiple touchdown passes in 3 straight games. I think, and all of these quarterbacks have exceptional numbers. I think Zach Wilson, with another week with the full practice reps, could be in a good spot. For the running backs, definitely look into the Colts. Like we were talking earlier, I'll definitely prefer Deion Jackson due to his pass catching abilities, and the matchup is going to be pretty good. The Chargers has been giving up so much production to running backs, even if they both split. I still think Deion Jackson will have a better day, but if you miss out on him, definitely look into Zach Moss because he could just be in that 2-down role. So running back again, Tyler Algier was dropped probably after Cordell Patterson came back to a degree, and he wasn't putting up as much production. I think he's like 35% owned between Yahoo and ESPN leagues, but you saw what he did: 17 carries, 120-something yards on a touchdown. We were kind of, I was thinking, we probably weren't banking, but we were hope the Falcons become a better passing team with Desmond Ridder, but now they're going to run that ball. Desmond Ridder didn't really look good, so I think Tyler Algier is in a good spot. Maybe if he gets above that 50% rush load, he's going to be a good person to have, especially in the finals against the Cardinals. And then tight ends. I guess I'm going to stay with Chiggy. He got you 10 points in 3 straight weeks. It's not like anything good, but if not, I think definitely like I know Knox was dropped up in a couple of leagues. Yeah, that's about it.
All right. I like it. I like good top over 5 overall jibs. I like that. We'll talk about more of some of these positions in a few. My top 5 overall guys. I got Chuba Hubbard. Again, there's no order, but I mean, he's at best an RB3 in fantasy, especially in PPR leagues. I think they're going to be more negative game scripts, Carolina. And you can see that in that situation that Chuba outsnapped for him in this past week here. He had 6 targets over the last 2 games here now, seeing over double-digit carries in 3 of the last 4 games here in fantasy. I think if you're desperate for a running back, he fits. I mean, I know Detroit and Tampa are tough matchups, but if he's seeing that passing work, that's a big difference for me. And if you're needing that RB2, if you lost Jonathan Taylor and you might not be able to get the next guy on my list, he might be a nice consolation prize. The duo for the Colts, Deion Jackson, Zach Moss. Again, I'm not really sure how this backfield's going to come out here. I mean, Zach Moss looks like the guy that everyone should go after, but was that because they were up so much and they didn't need to use Deion Jackson's skills to that extent? Maybe, perhaps, probably so. We know that Deion Jackson had multiple good games early on in the season when Jonathan Taylor was out and performed at a high level. We know that Matt Ryan loves to throw to his running backs, and Deion Jackson is a little more better pass-catching back over Zach Moss. Both are worth adding onto your team here. I don't know if you're going to be wanting to start them come next week. Well, maybe we'll mention that on Thursday, but they do have good matchups, but they're worth adding at least, maybe keeping away from your opponent that might be desperate enough to start one of these guys. To me, that's a big thing. For wide receiver, I have Isaiah Hodgins from the New York Giants, and he's been pretty good over the last 2 months. He's averaged at least 4 catches for 40 yards over the last 2 months now, and while it's not great, there's some borderline wide receiver 3 appeal to him, and he gets the Minnesota Vikings this week, who are terrible against wide receivers, and it's no hard to trust his passing offense, but Hodgins seems to be a consistently nice floor play each and every week, and with good matchups against the Vikings, like I mentioned, and the Colts, he could have a boom week. And if you're looking for that big upside play at your flex spot, I think Hodgins could end up doing that once or twice over the next 2 weeks. I have a tight end in Jiggy. I mean, he's just, he's been good. At least 30 yards in 7 straight games. He got Houston and Dallas to finish the season. If you're looking for a tight end still, he needs to be picked up and put up on your team because he is literally thriving. Even with Treylon Burks back, I'm not scared. And last but not least, this depends on how tonight goes. One of the Rams wide receivers. Now, I want to know who does it well tonight. I have Tutu Atwell as the main guy right now I'm highlighting. But it could be Ben Skowronek. I can't say his name, Jibs.
Ben
Skowronek. Van Jefferson, thank you. One of these 3, I want to see who ends up being the target share leader on this team and the most productive, and that will kind of help me decide which one of these wide receivers produces, because they all produced last week with Baker. And I want to see who does it again in more of a consistent fashion, because Denver's a tough matchup, but they have that Chargers matchup coming down the stretch here, which is pretty good overall. So I'd love to see who ends up stepping up and taking that next level, because these are all young players who really haven't shown that they are consistent enough to be good NFL players, maybe Van Jefferson a little bit, but I'm really excited to see if Tutu Atwell can kind of get going, because he has that speed to really break through. But that would be my top 5 overall right now in terms of fantasy. And then let's get over to the positional or other waivers now, I'm calling them. All right, so other quarterbacks that you could pick up overall. Maybe you're looking for other players we didn't mention. Maybe you didn't like our top 5. Brock Purdy, obviously, is up there. Gardner Minshew versus Dallas. Zach Wilson, Jibs mentioned, against the Jags. Andy Dalton versus Cleveland. Sam Darnold versus Detroit. And Tyler Huntley potentially starting again for the Baltimore Ravens versus Atlanta. Anyone else that you want to mention out of this group, Jibs? I know you mentioned Zach Wilson already, but
if I had to pick up someone else out of this list, it would definitely be Brock Purdy. At least he has a track record. He has, I think, 3 straight games with 2 passing touchdowns at least. So like that's something to stand on.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think somewhere about, for me, Brock Purdy's number 1. Zach Wilson's maybe number 2. I would give Gardner Minshew a shot, honestly. I mean, he's had some swagger in his time. I mean, you just saw what Dallas just gave up to the Jacksonville Jaguars passing offense here. It was a lot. So, Gardner Minshew has a good enough of weapons around him to actually thrive possibly next week. It's going to be an important game for them to win, too, overall. So he's definitely another guy. I mean, a real dog horse would be Sam Darnold. Zach Wilson can look good against Detroit. Sam Darnold could do it, too, probably. So that's really reaching deep. In terms of running backs, again, no one just over that 40% mark I really had in mind, but some possible pickups. We mentioned most of these guys: Deion Jackson, Zach Moss, Chuba Hubbard, Tyler Algier. The best of the rest, we have Gus Edwards, Khalil Herbert, Jalen Warren, Royce Freeman. If he starts now for Houston, he had 11 carries this past week. Marlon Mack seems to be very involved in this Denver's offense, especially in the passing game. Jordan Mason, and obviously just continue to grab your backups or your opponent's backup. Jibs, any one of that best of the rest that sticks out to you?
Nah, not at all. They're just all in the same role. Marlon Mack, good job for that guy, man.
Yeah,
Putting in that work.
Yeah, he's just been on so many teams and not having a chance and getting a chance again. Obviously, I'd love to add Khalil Herbert if he ends up getting that starting gig back, or at least a 50-50, because he is a really good running back, but it might be too late with just 2 games left this season. Some other wide receivers here, Jibs, just over the 40% mark. Treylon Burks, Elijah Moore. Some other top possible pickups here. Marquise Goodwin. I really like him as well. If I didn't like, obviously, Isaiah Hodgins or some of the Rams wide receivers. Some of the best of the rest, we have Jahan Dotson, Chris Moore, Russell Gage, Matt Hollins, Isaiah McKenzie, Rashad Rashid, Terrence Marshall, KJ Osborne had a big blow-up game. Might be worth mentioning or picking up. And Noah Brown seems just getting touchdowns over the last few weeks here now. Any one of the best of the rest, Jibs, you want to mention or highlight a little bit more that you like?
Doxson, 2 phenomenal games in a row. He's been playing more snaps than Curtis Samuel, I think 17% more. Chris Moore, hopefully, if those guys if they come back, his role is gonna be relegated, but he's still got a 9-target game. Russell Gage, he could be a deep flex this week, especially if Julio doesn't play. I think they've been alternating, but it seems like when Gage is in the lineup and Julio isn't, he plays way more snaps than him. So I think he's prominent. And then obviously, like you said, the 2 third wide receivers on the team, Osborne and Brown, just having spectacular games this week. And I know Osborne had at least 2 back-to-back games with 10 or 11 more points in PPR, but it's just hard for me to know if the role is going to be sustainable given the pieces on their team, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, it's a lot of boomer bust players on that right side of that screen there. If you haven't seen all the best of the rest that I mentioned, a lot of them are just boomer bust guys. I mean, Osborne has a good matchup against the Giants this coming week. That could be potentially there, maybe. But yeah, it's not a great crew. But again, some of these guys, one of these guys in that group could end up having another boom game before the season's over. So it just depends on what guy you want to take advantage of. So, all right, in terms of tight end, just over that 40% mark is Taysom Hill, obviously, who's just randomly will put up a 15-point game out of nowhere for you. Chiggy's probably the best top possible pickup, and then some of the best of the rest. Noah Fant, Robert Tonyan, if he ends up coming alive tonight. If not, probably wouldn't touch him. Tyler Conklin, he's okay, I guess, but definitely not like CJ Uzomah having 2 touchdowns this past week. Daniel Ballinger is an okay option. Hunter Henry's an okay option. Trey McBride had best game of the season for like 43 yards this past week on 5 targets. Maybe that role is increasing with the third-string backup quarterbacks or whoever plays quarterback this week for the Cardinals. So that could be an interesting option. He has some pretty solid matchups at the end of the year. So anyone, Jibs, you want to mention the tight end group?
It's not just Noah Fant. He's just been the most relevant out of that group over the last month or so. So I know it's not prominent numbers, but he definitely needs a shout out.
Right, and he could end up seeing a larger role, obviously, if Tyler Lockett out of the offense here for the next few weeks. So he could see a big increase in targets. So he might be a really good pickup to pick up this coming week. So, all right, that's going to wrap up our waiver wire show this week, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the Trustometer here. Jibs, is there anything you want to mention before we get going tonight?
No, not at all. Good luck if you have people playing in this last game of the Week 15 slate.
Yes, hopefully you guys win your Week 15 game so you can come back with us tonight or even on Thursday to listen to our Start and Sit show to get ready for the semifinals. So as always, thank you guys for tuning in and listening. We always do appreciate you guys being here. This is why we do this. As always, please go check out our website at www.thefantasycoaches.com. We got our rankings, we got articles, we got my playbook that's up there, these podcasts, a bunch of cool things going on over at our website. You can follow us over on Twitter at Coaches Fantasy. You can like and subscribe to us here on YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. Give us a 5-star review over on wherever you listen to your podcast. You can like us over on Facebook. You can follow us over on Instagram. Got a bunch of things going on everywhere. And until we get back on Thursday, guys, enjoy the rest of your week 15, and we'll see you next time.